Welcome everyone to the GrEAt debate. I love education. That's not a rhetorical question. I love education. Yeah. And so now we're coming to the end of our beautiful adult school camp ELICOS experience that we do once a year. But it's not quite over yet. We have some tough questions to ask, and we're not afraid of a robust debate in this industry. We've got some very keen players on either side of me. Settle down. So I know that we are going to hash this question out quite strongly. The question of the year is, change brings about more opportunity than challenge. So I want you to stew over that a little bit, start to make those tough decisions, because you will ultimately be voting for whether this is true or not true, hopefully swayed by our impressive speakers. So,
Sorry, wait. I wish you'd stop saying that.
It's making everyone uncomfortable. Brett?
Don't tell me I'm going to lose my job.
Oh, we've got a handful on our hands today. So, I think every industry has its own power words. And I think, I'm not talking about, industry jargon. I'm talking about words that really drive our industry forward and really create change and instigate things. And like the way Cozy Nook has done that for the real estate agents. So, I personally have a favourite power word for the ELICOS industry, and my favourite power word is elicit. I love eliciting, as I know you do as well.
Oh, sorry, how do you spell that?
You should know, Jeremy. Okay, so we will be eliciting today from our esteemed colleagues the answer to the question, or the statement, change brings about more opportunity than challenge. And I'm going to introduce you now to our two teams. On the affirmative side, arguing for, is Brett Blacker, the incoming CEO of English Australia, who is a veteran of an intensive few weeks in the role. And he'll be going head-to-head on the against team with our captain, Sue Blundell, the outgoing CEO of English Australia. Now, I think this is an indication of the kind of trailblazing, courageous types of people we attract to this industry, because I'd just like to elicit from you now any examples you can think of in any other industry where the outgoing CEO and the incoming CEO, within a few weeks of being in the job, go head-to-head publicly in front of the entire industry, excluding the Australian government. Does anyone think of a similar example in another industry? No, not really. No. And I think that just proves how special our industry is and how special you are, Brett.
I've been called that before.
You'll get your moment in the sun, Sue, don't you worry. Now, Brett, we have full confidence in you being able to do this. We did talk about this and go, oh, he's had a busy few weeks, and the last few days have been very intense, and then he was up all night, and we're really glad you've agreed to step in and do this, because we tried to get a few Canberra ministers up, but they were too scared. Yeah.
Thank you, Ruby. I certainly appreciate that and the sympathy from you and colleagues. It has been a hard few weeks, but I'm here today, and I'll certainly do my best for the team.
Yeah. And you are the captain of English Australia now, after all.
It's a privilege. It's an absolute privilege.
And Australians love an underdog, so go get them.
We'll come. Thanks, Madam Speaker.
Okay.
And may I say you're looking dashing today.
Oh, well, thank you. Just remember, I'm not the judge.
As are all of you.
And on Brett's team, we have Nicki Blake, returned. Yeah. An absolute legend, I must say, from the debate last year. I still chuckle myself to sleep on the pillow at night.
Legend. It's better than DOS, I think.
It is. Yeah, just put it on the door.
Or just on a T-shirt.
Yeah. I remember last year from the debate when you had a well-known agent up here talking about how quality doesn't matter, and up comes his website with slow, deliberate circling of every time the word quality was mentioned. She plays dirty.
That's why I'm a legend.
You said this is going to be nice.
It's not. It's not. I don't know who told you that. The third speaker on the affirmative team is Phil Chappell from Macquarie University. And Phil is a lecturer and a researcher at Macquarie, and so I'm expecting some pretty racy research that can be flung over this way.
Absolutely evidence-based.
Looking forward to it.
Look out, Harmer.
That's the spirit. Over here, the captain of the against team, Sue Blundell, the outgoing CEO of English Australia and possibly the most euphoric woman in the room. And I think we need to bear in mind that at this...
It's not drugs, I'm telling you.
I think we need to bear in mind at this stage, Sue can pretty much say whatever she likes. Yeah.
And will.
And will.
And will.
And can I just say how tragic it is that we're up against someone going for the sympathy vote, a trash talker, and a researcher.
Ooh. Save it for the rebuttal. All right. Okay. The second speaker on Sue's team is an absolute rock and roll superstar of the ELICOS industry,
No,
Jeremy
she's not.
Harmer. And he can pitch an opinion or two. We've seen that many a time.
Yeah, but I didn't realise Australia was so scary.
Yeah. You heard about the spiders.
Am I going to survive this experience, do you think?
I think you will. Yeah.
Jeremy's done a lot of preparation for this.
We'll carry you out.
And we have Pamela Humphreys on the last speaker on the against team. Pamela at the moment is with Griffith English Language Institute, is part of the English language enhancement strategy. So you want that on your team. Go Pam. Bit of enhancement. All right, so first thing we're going to do is a little bit more of a elicitation. And that's where I'm going to put out the statement to you, and you have to raise one hand only to tell me whether you agree or disagree. So one hand up if you agree with the statement. What is it again? Change brings about more opportunity than challenge. Who agrees? All right. Oh, we've got a glass half full, people.
They're just saying
This
that,
is
they don't really
good.
mean it, okay?
Okay, we are going to... Your effort is to completely dampen their confidence.
You haven't asked people to put their hand up the other way yet.
Oh, I just counted them as downers, you know. All right. Who doesn't agree that change brings about more opportunity than challenge?
Go to.
Kerry. All right. So we know where we stand, don't we? Now, the job of our speakers is either to get more hands up for the first for the affirmative, or more hands up for the negative. You ready to go? There's a few rules that you need to be aware of. Each of you have 6 minutes, including your rebuttals. When there's 1 minute to go, I will be making this sound. All right? Don't let that put you off. And if you try to go over 6 minutes, I have a water pistol. All right? Do we all understand the rules?
Is there any electricity in the room?
How did you get on in Australia, Karen?
Now I have the last say. I'm going to make that clear. And I can change the rules at any time. And I expect you to deal with that change in either a positive or a challenge way. Okay? All right, so I think we're ready to start. I invite Brett to begin the great debate.
Thank you for joining us for this afternoon's great debate. It was an interesting proposition coming here, and my team and I have had to spend a little bit of time planning for today. Our first concern, in fact, was the actual proposition put forward to us, and whether there was, in fact, any question, or whether, in fact, it was just a statement. And in reading it back to you, the statement that was made today was, change brings more opportunity than challenge. So we couldn't figure out where there was a question or where there was actually any point to be debated. However, we thought it would be novel to allow our team to challenge us, and as my colleague Phil has noted, we thought we'd bring an evidence-based approach to this, just to, I guess, inform our colleagues in an expert manner how academics would approach this topic. I hope nobody come today thinking it was going to be a fun afternoon. It's certainly not. This is the end of a thought-provoking conference, one with an immense amount of thought leadership, and that's the way our affirmative team plan to approach it. Now, thank you, Madam Speaker, for certainly introducing my colleagues, and as you've noted, to my left first, Nicki Blake, who is the anthropological expert of change. I think that's quite well known across the industry. And legend. And Phil Chappell, expert linguist and researcher in the language of change. Madam Adjudicator, as outlined here today, we have these two highly respected experts, and they'll no doubt support me in winning the debate today. Colleagues, I'm going to bring you back to the start of our conference, and what a wonderful conference it has been. I think one of the most biggest highlights was our opening speaker, Dominic. And Dominic really set the tone for this conference this year. And he came out and he asked us to challenge our assumptions. He was thought-provoking, he was inspiring, and not once did he put up that there was a barrier or a challenge to that opportunity. His proposition, used from 120 case studies of industry, was that strategic plans had to look at how industries or companies would challenge those assumptions, not sit still, but by challenging those assumptions, and a willingness to do so was an opportunity to move forward. He provided wonderful examples, and as you will note, and I'm sure you recall, Kodak, an example of a failure in this regard, one that didn't have that chance, one that sort of put their own challenge in play, and the other of Burberry, who in a time of downturn actually exceeded the market and had market growth. Now, as I mentioned, we are going to bring this evidence-based approach. My approach to tackling this today will be looking at the media and some of the social research. Nicki will do this anthropological review, and Phil will then take a linguistic analysis of change. I myself did a little bit of philosophical review, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the work of Nido, one of the most wonderful motivational speakers, reports and consults to presidents and governments all around the world. I think he summed it up very nicely, and it doesn't require any debate. It is quite simple. Change brings opportunity. Oh, sorry. Then I look at things that in the public media. Oh, I'm sorry, folks. It's just to remind you that change brings opportunity, and we can't sit still. We must, as a country, think about how we're perceived, what we're putting forward, and remember that there will always be an opportunity for change, and we shouldn't be challenged we shouldn't be challenged by the present. Sorry, folks. So I did do some Google research, as all good literature reviews do. You hit the Google, you put in those keywords, and I put in change. Colleagues, as you'll note, not once did challenge come up. Simply a word, change. And this was the spectrum of wonderful slogans that popped up on my screen. There were tens of millions of these, I'm sure you're all aware. But not once did change equal opportunity, did change equal challenge. Quite frankly, it was opportunity all over. Colleagues, the second thing I did, given the theme and the nature of our conference, was obviously to then put teachers into that search. And colleagues, as you will see quite clearly, teachers change lives. That change of lives is changing the opportunities for all of those students that we support. And there is that serious side of this argument and debate, colleagues, and I know you're well aware of it. But it was quite evident to me that we had to cover off these two aspects of who is our audience, what are we trying to deliver as a sector, and who are we trying to lives that we change. So colleagues, we then followed through with our methodological research, and we put in a wordle of all of the conference papers that were presented here for the English Australia Conference. And would you believe, in the map of Australia, the map of English Australia, we ended up with this wonderful collection of words that really represented the essence of this debate, that life, change, the positivity that came out of opportunity. And colleagues, once again, I remind you that there is no challenge in there. There is learning, there is change, there is thoughts, love, embrace, and there was some of that happening on the dance floor last night, I'm sure we won't talk about, and we remember it. Colleagues, we also thought in any good literature review, one must fall back to our cartoon. I think if we just take a moment to reflect, we as an organisation, we as an industry do not want to be held back. We do not want to be challenged. We see opportunity moving forward, and we see it in a positive manner. Change brings about opportunity, not challenge.
Just say.
6:26.
It's private. It's private. I believe I set the rules. All the trouble you are. All right, thank you, Brett. I would now like to invite Sue Blundell to the podium to counter for the against team.
Good afternoon, everybody. Before I open for the other team, I'd just like to accuse the opposition of a couple of things. I like to start aggressive. First of all, the crime of selective Googling.
Yes.
Claiming to have Googled and only finding the word opportunity associated with change. I too Googled. I found challenge. Selective Googling. I accuse you. Secondly, bad cartoons from the 1970s. A crime in my book. Well, on that note, I'm going to move into my opening on behalf of my team. We have not spent the last 3 months rehearsing, as our opposition have. We're too confident for that. We think we can sway your vote to agree with us, and I'm confident that my colleagues will support me in whatever they decide to do, because I have no idea what they're going to do. Can I ask, were you the goody two-shoes in school? Yeah, I knew there were a few in the room. When the teacher asked you a question, were you the one with your hand up trying to give the right answer? The proposition that change brings about more opportunity than challenge is the right answer for the bright-eyed, keen students that are sitting at the front row. And I'm talking about you lot. Myself, as a back row sitting student, and I'm talking about you, we don't assume that the positives of change are going to always outweigh the negatives. Is it always the case? I don't think so, and I'm going to prove to you that that is the case. So, stability. Can we all agree that stability is a positive thing? Come on. Work with me on this. Thank you. I started with English Australia in 2002. I've been executive director for 13 years. Yes, years of change, but stability in the leadership. Unlike Australia. When I started with English Australia in 2002, John Howard was Prime Minister. Simon Crean, remember him, Leader of the Opposition. In Queensland, you had Peter Beattie as the Premier. Someone called Mike Horan, never heard of him, was the Leader of the Opposition. Across Australia, we have had 66 changes in leadership over the last 13 years. compared to 1 in English Australia. In fact, looking across the leadership of the nation now, there's only one person that's still the same. Can anyone pick who that is? Yes, Western Australia is still 10 years behind. Oh, sorry, I've just lost the Western Australian vote, haven't I? Let's contrast Australia's approach with that of the UK. Elizabeth II took the throne in 1952. This year, she celebrated 63 years as monarch, overtaking Queen Victoria to record the longest reign. Who thinks after 63 years that change would be a good thing? Well, maybe not. Now, can I ask how many people in the room have an iPhone? Oh, lots. And how many people were excited to hear about the release of the iPhone 6S? Were you excited to hear about all the changes that there were going to be that would make this so much of a better phone? Well, I'm sure the new rose gold option is a great reason to spend a lot of money on a new phone. Isn't it just the same damn thing, though? It's just change for change's sake, just to get you to spend more money every year. There's a reason why companies use the slogan, the original and the best. Some things just don't need changing. Take the incandescent light bulb, for example. You knew I was going to put up this picture, didn't you? Ever since Edison produced the first practical light bulb way back in 1880, not much has changed. Looks the same, functions the same. Allowing for inflation, it actually costs the same. And I'm going to leave you with a final image that I think you will remember for the rest of the conference, the next 30 minutes. The flush toilet, perfected in the late 19th century. This hallmark of civilization has remained largely unchanged since its inception. One of the great innovators of the modern toilet, Thomas Crapper, would still recognize the thing and appreciate it for the remarkable piece of engineering that it remains to this day. One of the few truly indispensable devices they got right the first time. So in conclusion, change is not always positive, nor desirable, nor do the opportunities always outweigh the challenges. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. All right. Coming up behind Sue, we have Nicki Blake.
Oh, Sue. We just got accused of all kinds of stuff. So we got accused of selective Googling. I'm going to, in a moment, prove that, I can be selective as well. Not in the world of Google. I'm going to go where the hard facts are. We've been accused of bad cartoons. I can go one better than bad cartoons, and you will see that in a moment. We've been accused of being front row students. Front row students can change into back row students so easily to bring about opportunity. And I'm going to take that opportunity. And Sue claimed to have the most memorable image of the whole conference. No, I have the most memorable images of the whole conference. When I was doing my research for this, because we did research for a while, because we want to be prepared because we're front row students, back row students when we need to be. I wanted to look at what we actually do, the language that we take to our students in the classroom. So I went into course books, and I had a look at the course books, and I tried to find where we teach about change, and I tried to find where we teach about challenge. And what I found was that there's very, very little teaching students about challenge. We don't have those units. They're not there. But we do have this. You've taught this lesson. I used to. I used to have a Barbie when I was little, but I don't anymore. I used to be a front row student. Now I'm a back row student. We teach used to. We sign it. And we teach the students this language because it's important for them to be able to describe change, more important for them to be able to describe change than challenge. And you will have a typical unit where you've got a picture of someone like Brad Pitt when he was still a geek, and you will contrast it to the picture of a successful Brad Pitt now, and the students will draw the parallels and say, yes, he had to change to get the opportunities to become famous Brad Pitt now. And I thought about putting a photo of Brad up, and I thought, you don't know Brad. What's Brad to you? But you do know the affirmative team. And we are going to get anthropological now to show you how necessary change is. Would you let this woman run a language school?
Jeremy, you look good.
The guiding thought is that academic management requires a certain level of maturity. Maturity requires change. Past Nicki would not be allowed near a quality-endorsed college. We're getting back to that used to language. I used to have hair like Cousin It. I used to have high-waisted blue jeans. You've got to love the 80s. I used to drink Southern Comfort. That was the last time and only time I drank Southern Comfort. So you can see, change is important. You can see it's right in front of you. We're putting in there. She probably doesn't have many opportunities. Not if she keeps drinking that. Had to change. And then we look at Phil. Oh, Phil. Respected Phil. Academic, trainer of teachers, supervisor of research. Would you let this guy publish your academic journal? You wouldn't even get in his cab. If Phil had not made certain changes in his life, maybe one change, perhaps he'd probably be driving an Uber today. Phil had to make certain choices, certain changes to get to where he is now. Can someone get a photo of the two of them together? Because I would really like that. He used to be a cabbie. He used to be a surfer, I think. I don't know, I'm looking at that now. Saving the best to last. You don't want to stop me before I've got to this one, because now we're going to talk about Brett. Brett, captain of the affirmative team, captain of captain of EA. Oh, captain, my captain. You can all stand on your chairs later if you want. When we heard Sue was leaving, there was like panic. And the phrase kept coming up, big shoes to fill, big shoes to fill. Who is going to be the proverbial Cinderella to put their feet into the English-Australia glass slipper? There was a selection committee to recruit and find Sue's replacement. It took a long while. Someone to represent the industry here in Australia and overseas. Someone to be our voice in Canberra. Someone with gravitas. Not this guy. Would you let this guy be CEO of your natural peak body? We all got a peek at the body now. And so Brett kind of sums up the total of the previous points. He's made change. And the affirmative team have put ourselves on the line to prove ourselves to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicki.
I didn't have photos first.
Now, Jeremy, I invite you to the podium to combat what you have just heard.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is with a heavy heart that I realise that I have to demolish entirely the arguments of the last speaker. I find this an ungentlemanly thing to do, but there's nothing I can do about it, and the only thing I can think of, the only way I can think of doing it is to sing for you. Abide with me, fast falls the evening tide, the darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. Change and decay in all around I see. O thou who changest not, abide with me. You know, the problem with you young people is you don't know how insulting. Change is good. I mean, you might want to change from. Actually, I thought you were rather sexy, and I'm gonna. But anyway, you might want to change like that. But I don't want to change. Change ain't any good for me. Change is just a quick one-way street to a nice, very nice place. Change. This is change. A white beard. This is change. Hair coming out of the back of my head. This is change. My legs palsied and short and hopefully change. My voice going change. What's so good about bloody change? To be honest, it's bloody awful. Let me tell you a story about change. You want to hear about change? Oh, by the way, you want to hear a story about change? One of the great figures, one of the founders of the English language teaching industry, the great Louis Alexander. You want to hear a story about Louis? Anyone ever met Louis? No, you're way too young, because he changed. Bonk, he's gone. So let me tell you a story about Louis. Louis published the most successful course book in the entire history of English language publishing. It was called First Things First. And there are people alive today, well, barely, who can remember this particular course. It was the great course. There are translations of English. If you go to Beijing in China, to the offices of the Foreign Language Teaching Research Press, you will find a statue of Louis Alexander. And one day, Louis Alexander decided that grammar translation and all this kind of stuff was, but audiolingualism was wrong. He got the functional bug. So he wrote a new book. And you know what he did? He went round the country and round the world saying, you shouldn't be doing this audiolingualism stuff anymore. You should use my new book. And the teachers listened to the first part of his suggestion and not the second. Because the idea that you would want to change from something that worked to something that didn't is lousy. Listen, you talked about iPhone. My team captain, my captain. By the way, oh, my captain, you can't mention oh, my captain. What was the one thing that happened as a result of this great Robin Williams teacher? You know what happened? A kid killed himself. That's what happened. Oh, my captain, don't give me that rubbish. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, yes, iPhones. iPhones. What's the result of the great iPhone? The greatest change to civilization ever. I'll tell you what the thing is. It's about 3-week marriages. You go to a hotel by a beach, and what do you see? You see people who've just got married, and they're sitting there. And what are they doing? They're looking at their bloody iPhones on Facebook and Instagram, not talking to each other, and it's the end of their marriage. I tell you what change does. This is what you do. The British Council in Prague, well, it could have been anywhere, they say, right, we're going to change, and from tomorrow onwards, there will be an interactive whiteboard in every single classroom, and we're getting rid of all the old whiteboards. And the teachers go in on Monday. Result? Alcoholism. Stress. Complete collapse of their amour propre. It's absolutely awful. I'll tell you what changes. You know those beautiful Mozart players this morning? Well, why didn't you give them some electric guitars and do it like that? Because that's changed. No, I like Mozart. Mozart is good. It's beautiful. I don't want to change Mozart or get old or any of that kind of thing. Oh, I tell you, here's another kind of change. Hello, dear students from China. The way that you have been learning English forever is completely wrong. I'm going to change it. Get into groups and talk. That's change. Change. Oh, I tell you another kind of change. Oh, a great kind of change. I mean, you people, you have no right to be sitting here. They just and as my captain told you, didn't she? They've been rehearsing for weeks. That's not change. That's a kind of, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude. Anyway, so here's another change. One of the greatest things that has happened in the history of the world is the selfie. The selfie. We love selfies, one of the great new changes. Have you been reading about selfies recently? This is true. Did you read about the girl who took a selfie of herself with a bear behind her? They found the camera. Or what about the one who took a selfie of herself standing on a precipice? She wasn't standing there for very long. Selfies don't work. What about, oh help, I'm running out of things to say. How am I doing for that? Good, right, okay, I've stopped. Don't, you listen. Seriously. Just imagine that your academic management comes to you and they say, we're going to change everything. Opportunity? Don't be ridiculous. It's the end of everything, and the only thing you can do to get rid of it is to go to an English Australia dinner and dance yourself flat out until the next day and then feel real shit. So, I urge you, don't be seduced by this travesty, this future-looking stuff. Stick with us. Stick with the water closet.
I'd like now to welcome Phil to the podium. Go get him, Phil.
Madam Speaker, fellow change agents, English language teaching comrades, we've just listened to some hysterical nonsense, empty rhetoric, empty diatribes. The song was wonderful, but it didn't convince me. As Brett had mentioned, I'm going to present an evidence-based argument for our side. And I trawled Google, an unselective Google search, Sue, to find some evidence that Mr. Harmer may actually support the idea of change. And evidence I found. In English language teaching, of course, and second language acquisition research, we have the concept of fossilization, which is to become or caused to become fixed and incapable of change or development, which I think my previous speaker demonstrated very well. However, let's have a listen to what he had to say about this several years ago.
Oh, that's quite good.
I think fossilization is a very big issue. It's a very big problem because we all get to a level of comfort in the languages we speak, apart from our own first language, and I guess you sort of lose your own sharpness about whether you're making mistakes or not.
Fossilization is something to beware of. You lose your sharpness. Fossilization is the ability to change.
That wasn't me.
It was that Jeremy Harmer lookalike.
Yes.
I could rest my case, but as I said, I'm also going to go through a very short linguistic argument about this. Now, our statement today is change brings about more opportunity than challenge. It could be opportunity brings about more change than challenge. It could be challenge brings about more opportunity than change. It could be opportunity brings about more challenge than change. It could be change brings about more challenge than opportunity. It could be challenge brings about more change than opportunity. What a load of bollocks. All of these statements are meaningless, they're senseless, because they're a play on words. Change is a noun that's masquerading as a verb. Challenge is a verb that is masquerading as a noun. Bring is an action verb that needs an actor and there's not one there. About is a preposition that lacks any certainty or any degree of certainty. Opportunity is the only faithful lexical item here today. opportunity is at the base root of Darwinian thinking. Opportunity is the result of perceiving something as useful in the environment. Perceiving something as useful represents the relationship between you and your environment, as the Moggy shows. This is an affordance, and the late great Professor Leo Van Leer has instructed us about affordances. If you don't have affordances in your life, you perish. Therefore, opportunity is a fact of life. And change and chalum are confused lexical items. Ergo, change brings about more opportunity than challenge is the only acceptable fact, I'm afraid, my laggards. And who wouldn't believe this guy? For those who don't believe this guy, and I thank our opposition team captain for raising the idea of the light bulb, the inventor of the light bulb actually told us that opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. I rest my case.
Okay, Pamela, are we ready? Please step up to the podium.
I love this conference, don't you? Yeah, but I do think that it's a good thing that it's coming to an end, because I do feel as though the tone is deteriorating rapidly. Yesterday, Dominic was talking about horse poo. Sue's been talking about the flush toilet and the crapper. And these three have just been talking crap for 15 minutes. So, okay, where is the clicker? There we go. All right, well, I'd like to talk to you about change management. Just like a show of hands, how many of you have studied anything about change management or read anything about change management? Yes, quite a lot of you, okay. How many of you have experienced change management, or you've had to manage change? Yes, I'd say pretty much everybody in the room has probably experienced change management at some point. So maybe some of you have seen some of the visuals, the flow charts, the many visuals that are available about change management, like the Julian Phillips phases of organizational change. Have you ever seen that, anybody? Yes, or maybe the change management iceberg. Anybody ever seen that? Yes, but not only flow charts and images, there's a whole plethora of nomenclature as well. Things like, oh, and I think it was Phil that said it earlier, change agent. Oh. Change leader, and not only that, but change fatigue. Yes, and there are also theories about change management. Perhaps you've heard of nudge theory, where we're supposed to nudge people gently to change and do what we want as managers. There are theories. There's a myriad of flowcharts, graphics, theories, books, yes, I Googled too, for managing change, because change management is big business. And why is it big business? Because it's an opportunity, or because it's a challenge? That's a rhetorical question for now, but oh, thank you, yes, please do applaud. And there I rest my case. No, I'm not going to rest my case there, because don't trust me. Trust the experts. Yesterday, Dominic said something very deep. He said, not the horse poo bit, he said, change is really hard. Remember? Yeah, change is really hard. Are you listening? Yeah. But not only that, don't just trust Dominic, because a whole heap of experts, McKinsey and Company, IBM, blah, 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 have all said that 70% of change initiatives lead to failure. And I could rest my case right there. That's such a good statistic, I'm going to say it again. 70% of change initiatives lead to failure. And I'm going to do what all politicians do, because we're so stupid we don't get it unless they say it 3 times. 70% lead to failure. So I could rest my case right there, but when I timed my presentation for the dogs yesterday, I realized I still had 3 minutes to go. So I'm going to bring it right into the ELICOS sector, and I'm going to talk about a change and a challenge that we've all experienced, and that is fluctuating student enrollments. Anybody experience fluctuating student enrollments? Oh, yes. So I'm going to introduce, or reintroduce, for those of you who were in Perth a couple of years ago and remember Macquarie. 2 of you, great, okay. All right, that's fine, it's fine, I'm not bitter. Well, McEllicot's head office, some of you will remember, is at 1 Slippery Slope, Dodgyville. Yeah, and they're actually everywhere in the world now, everywhere, apart from North Korea, obviously. And I was talking to Richard Arkell earlier, and he did say that map makes it, really difficult to sleep at night. But I'd like to show you some McEllicot's trends over the last few years. Just look at those trends. They have really struggled with fluctuating student numbers. Massive peaks, massive troughs, and if you look carefully, in 2013, it was so challenging they even went back in time for a while. But it's okay now because they're experiencing exponential growth. Anybody been there? But that's a challenge too, isn't it? Anybody maybe not got enough resources, not enough books, not got enough classrooms? Anybody? Not enough teachers? Yeah. Thank you so much, the person who took that photograph of me last year. It's fine. Yes, so it is really a challenge, and I'd like to paint a scenario for you in finishing of what happened last week in a McEllicot's college. It was Monday morning, and they were so busy. All the teachers were testing, and admin were busy testing all of these students, placing them in class. Meanwhile, the DOS was on the phone calling everybody in a 200K vicinity, trying to call anyone with an ELICOS qualification, trying to fill her roster. And at 5 o'clock, she realized she still had one EAP class with no teacher. Anybody been there? Oh, yeah. But she thinks, it's okay. I'm not going to panic because at 6 o'clock, okay, I'm nearly done. At 6 o'clock, a fairly inexperienced teacher was coming in for an interview, but she thought maybe it will be okay. Maybe I'll be able to staff that one remaining EAP class. And the conversation went something like this. The DOS said, okay, so I see you've got quite a lot of general English experience, but have you ever taught EAP? And the teacher leaned forward and looked at her quizzically and replied, EA what? And the DOS thought, okay, how desperate am I? And she said, look, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. You're hired. Yeah, and that's why change brings opportunity for challenge.
Well, how are we going for time in general? Aparna? 5 minutes. Oh, really? Okay, well, you're not going to get to ask questions. We've whizzed on by there. Okay. We're going to go straight to Brett's final rebuttal and summing up, you have 4 minutes, Brett, and there's 5 left, so sorry about that, Sue. Anyway. Okay, ready?
No one's going
I'll just
anywhere.
take my time.
That's their challenge.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, as I outlined at the start of our presentation today of the debate, my team were going to bring you an evidence-based approach. And I'm sure, as you will see, we've been able to articulate that to you. And I also promise you I'll be keeping my jacket on. Colleagues, whilst I knew we would bring an evidence-based approach, I wasn't quite prepared for the hysteria that was going to come from the other side, the drama that was going to come from the other side, the eccentricness that was going to come from the other side, even though I think she stole my clicker as well. Okay, and colleagues, you note that there was a couple of key themes that we picked up on actually at the start of our presentation, at the end of mine to start with, that if it seems too hard. And the cornerstone for the argument from my colleague Pamela, who used her McEllicos scenario, was it's just too hard to change. We don't want to do change management. We don't want to go down that stuff. We're sure it's a good idea, but it's just too hard. I think we countered that up front. So I think, with all due respect to my colleague, that should not be the excuse for us challenging our assumptions today. The anthropological review of how it's changed our 3 lives, I hope demonstrated to you the positive effects of change. Certainly, my good colleague showed that ageing is a factor. We'll leave the debate of fossilisation in his capable hands, and we thank him for supporting our argument today that you lose your sharpness. Thank you, Jeremy. They were kind words. Colleagues, there was a linguistic analysis provided by my colleague Philip who proved that fossilisation process and no change is not an option. And it would present not only a challenge, but that opportunity was the only faithful lexical item in that whole sentence or statement. Now, colleagues, I guess we've been planning for a while. Yes, we take this seriously. This wasn't a debate we were coming into just to roll over by our good, esteemed colleagues. With all due respect, we were humbled by their knowledge, and therefore we wanted to ensure that this evidence-based approach was sound for the good academic minds of this room. We certainly weren't going to go into toilet humour and lower ourselves down those pipes. But thank you, Sue, for taking us there as well. Now, colleagues, it's clear which half of this team, which one of these teams glass half full and which one is half empty. We'll leave it up to you to decide where you sit at the end of this dialogue. Also, colleagues, we leave you with just two quotes, coming back to the theme of Dominic up front. And I'm sure you recognise this one. And he's been a theme of today, really, hasn't he? With the iPhone, that wonderful invention. Remember those bricks we used to carry around when they were first built? And we've gone from having the portability of a phone. And a lot of the technology and sharpness has come through the minds of those people crazy enough to think that they can change the world. They're the ones that do. Lastly, my colleague Phil talked about the process and with Darwin, and I'll leave you with the final quote and our message today, colleagues. I think it's undisputable that change does bring about opportunity, and far more opportunity than challenge. Thank you.
I'd now like to welcome Sue to the podium for 4 minutes, Sue. I repeat, 4 minutes.
I don't need 4 minutes. I have a prop. I'd actually sincerely like to thank the opposition for handing us a win on a platter, so to speak. Those photos, those 3 photos, they interpreted those photos as a demonstration of the opportunity presented by change. But if you looked at those photos, wasn't it a challenge? Wasn't it so much more of a challenge for them to change into what they are now? I think you'll agree with me on that one. Phil, what can I say about Phil? Esteemed researcher, academic. Did you understand a word of what he was talking about? He lost me at word 2. Certainly didn't convince me. And GrEAt, what can I say? Once you've been in the job for 13 years, you'll learn there's nothing wrong with toilet humour. So in closing, I'd like to say on behalf of my team that I'm sure, GrEAt, when you did your 3 job interviews with the board, external experts, and they asked you about the future of English Australia, and I'm sure they talked about the opportunities, but I'm sure they also talked about the challenges. And I'm sure that they also asked you as particular areas of focus on how you were going to address those challenges, because the challenges are certainly more than the opportunities. And so in closing, GrEAt, I have 4 words for you. Big shoes to fill.
Oh my. Well, that's raising the gauntlet, Sue. All right.
Hysteria.
Now, I could demand that we now take it to the next stage where you actually ceremoniously wear the shoes, Brett, but we don't have time for that, sadly. We'll look forward to that next conference. Now is the time for you to really think deeply about where your alignment now sits after hearing such compelling arguments. You now have the opportunity and challenge of making a decision.
Commiseration.
At least we've got one.
One hand only up for who agrees that change brings about more opportunity than challenge. Let's have a look, room.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And for those of you that are on the opposing side, please raise your hands.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm afraid I've got good news. We're tipping the water out of our glass. We're much less positive than we were at the beginning. We're going down a very bad road together, people. We're very negative. Change is looking terrible. All right. Congratulations.
Recount. I demand a recount. That was not evidence-based. No. I want a recount.
I think what I'd like to say to close is that it is clear that as a sector we do and can create change and hold influence. So thank you to you all for your wonderful expertise. It was quite astounding.